A shock for the motoring world. An electric car wins a prestigious auto industry award. It is the first time a battery-powered vehicle has scooped the coveted accolade. So has the auto industry turned a corner? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Rida Fakhri. Welcome to the program. A plug-in electric car developed by a startup company in the United States is leaving its conventional rivals behind. The Tesla Model S has been named Car of the Year by Motor Trends magazine, which is one of the industry's most closely watched awards. But can electric cars provide a realistic and commercial alternative? And are they really that green? Well, there are no exhaust fumes, so there's less pollution. The batteries that power electric cars are more efficient and require less maintenance. They're cheaper to run since electricity costs less than petrol. And electricity can be produced using renewable energy sources, for example, from the sun and wind. But critics argue that the electric car model doesn't add up if electricity is generated by coal-fired power stations. A study in Norway also said the toxicity of the manufacturing process had a greater potential for damaging the environment. There are also other disadvantages. The range and ease of recharging an electric car could be a worry for long-distance drivers, and electric cars have generally been more expensive, although prices are coming down. Now, Henry Ford once remarked, "You can have any color car you want as long as it's black." But is the colour of the cars of the future green? Well, joining me now to discuss this from London is Paul Steedman. He's a senior campaigner for Friends of the Earth and a specialist in climate change and energy. Also in London, Nick Gibbs, a car enthusiast. He's a UK correspondent for Automotive News Europe. Nick Gibbs, how far does the kind of recognition the Tesla S received go in promoting electric cars, in selling the public on the idea of buying into these alternative-powered electric vehicles?
Well, it's a big coup. It's a big coup for Tesla. What they've done, and they deserve the award. Let me say that they've created a car that's good-looking, that drives well, that is desirable, has a good range, more than other electric cars out there in the market. And yes, I think, as you said at the beginning, they have turned a corner with this car.
How much of a corner, though, have they turned? You say they look good, they are desirable, but will electric cars ever replace gasoline-powered cars? Are they really the future?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it? I mean, they've turned a corner because what they've done is made electric cars cool, and that's something that so far makers have been unable to do. They're just a bit nerdy, to put it bluntly, but this one isn't, and I think that's important in changing people's perception of the electric car. What it's not going to do is have people buying the car in droves. It is still very much a niche car. The entry version starts at $50,000. That's a lot of money. And it's still very much a specialist car, but it is an important stepping stone.
Cool, perhaps, but just how green, Paul Steedman? Some engineers, notably in Europe, are questioning the widely held assumption that these electric cars are greener, are better for the environment. Is that true? Do you agree with this?
The key thing really is that electric vehicles are only as green as the electricity that's used to power them. So if we're producing our electricity from coal, from gas, then no, they're not a massive step forward really. But the challenge for us is to ensure that we get our electricity from clean sources, from the wind, the waves, the sun, the tides. And in that case, electric vehicles are a really important part of going green for the future.
But how much greener does one go if one depends on these types of cars? By creating one problem, do you then perhaps, as some of the critics argue, by solving a problem, do you create another? Because some of these new studies suggest that there is quite a significant level of toxicity associated with the manufacturing process.
I think that's absolutely the case, that we need to look in a very rounded way at how we produce all our vehicles, to be honest. There are problems with the manufacture of all sorts of cars, of all sorts of vehicles. the key thing in terms of electric vehicles is making sure that as we power them from renewables. We get off the coal and the gas powering the power stations, and in turn that allows us to get away from the oil dependency, which we know is bad for climate change.
And talking about this point, oil dependency, one wonders to what extent governments should try to promote this type of environmentally friendly or environmentally friendlier car that might also reduce the dependence on foreign oil. Governments have been accused in the past of not doing enough to promote alternative sources of power for these cars because they do very nicely with the kind of taxes that they get from fuel. Just to give you an idea, last year the British government, for example, earned $1.30 for every litre of fuel sold to consumers at the pumps. That's almost 60% in tax. Germany raked in more than half of the price of a litre of fuel in tax, while the rate in Japan was less than 40%. Now, the figure in the United States was considerably lower, the government there earning just 13 cents a litre. Nick Gibbs, what about governments' reluctance to develop these alternative sources of power for cars? Will they forego the kind of tax revenue they get from fuel, from diesel?
Well, it's true. They are addicted to the income that comes from petrol and from diesel. And there's no doubt that if we ever start buying electric cars in significant numbers, they're going to have to recoup some of some of those losses, and they're going to have to do that in the form of taxing the electricity that we put into the car. So consumers might think, well, where is my incentive to move to electric cars if the governments are just going to take away the one advantage they have, which is that they've got this, at the moment, it's a cheaper form of fuel.
Should governments, Paul Steedman, be giving consumers more incentives? If these cars reduce a country's dependence on oil, if they also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, should governments be promoting them much more aggressively?
I think it's absolutely right that governments should definitely be taking a key role in providing incentives for consumers to take up these vehicles. And in some cases, they already are providing some incentives. But one of the key roles that the government has is in ensuring that the infrastructure that we need to make these cars more user-friendly is there. Is the government rolling out charging points all around the country to ensure that when you're on the street, when you're on the motorway, you can charge up your vehicle quickly and easily and efficiently? We think that the government has got a key role to play in doing just that.
Well, we've been getting plenty of reaction online here at Al Jazeera. We asked, will electric cars lead the way on our roads and leave petrol motors in the ditch? Maurice Kent Thompson says the combustion engine has long been past its day. The auto industry has mushroomed the electric car for the past 50 years. It's time to send the gas-guzzling, sludge-burning oil Texas tea that is back to extinction from whence it came. Elizabeth Owen says that it's good, but what to do about toxic battery disposal? While Jonathan Malachi Olivares hopes the entire world gives up any form of oil fuel, he says we're killing our earth, our planet, the place we live in, and our children will live in. Jessica Lange says we need to give energy diversity a chance. She says, to all the naysayers, when we came down off of our horses, there were people that were afraid. Look at what happened. Let innovation and imagination have a chance. Fear gets us nowhere. So what effect then is this all having on the climate? Globally, road transport is responsible for around 16% of man-made CO2 emissions. According to the International Organization of Motor Vehicle Manufacturers, the group says electricity generation and heating accounts for the lion's share of almost 44% of emissions, which is where things get confusing, as this is where electric cars could derive their power. Nick Gibbs, first just looking at how much sought after these cars can actually be without taking into account right now the environmental dimension. The manufacturers of this Model S, Tesla, say that they think that electric cars can be much better than conventional cars. If that is the case, why is the public still today so skeptical about the notion of electric cars? Why haven't they really bought into it much more than they have, according to market share of these cars?
It's not true that these cars are much better. I mean, it's true the Model S is a great car, and but what they've done is sort of accelerated themselves to the level of the best mid-sized luxury saloons. And the advantages that they have, they're quieter, disappear once you're above 40, 50 miles an hour because you just hear the tire roar of the car anyway. So, and apart from that, they don't really have that much over a standard car. And of course, they've got the obvious disadvantage that you have to plug them in and wait for the charge to fuel them up. Because obviously you can just be in and out of a fuel station by 5 minutes.
So what is mainly holding them back? Is it the purchase price, or is it the lack of infrastructure when it comes to recharging these electric?
Yes, it's infrastructure. Sorry, I was speaking to the boss of Nissan. Nissan obviously sells the Leaf, which is the best-selling pure electric car in Europe. And he was saying it's infrastructure. People stop at the final hurdle when they come to buying a car because there isn't the infrastructure there. They worry that they'll get out there and they won't be able to plug it in and along the motorways. That is changing. We are slowly getting more and more charge points. But even then, the majority of people are going to say, so what? If I can buy a car that's better for cheaper, why on earth do I need to buy an electric car? And this is the problem that governments are going to have to solve if they're serious about getting people into electric cars. But it's hard to say whether they are or not.
Paul Steedman, what about environmental concerns? Is it counterproductive, as some people suggest, to promote these types of cars in country where electricity is generated through oil and coal, and not so much through wind and solar systems?
Well, the crucial thing is that electric vehicles are only a part of the solution. They're only a small element, I guess, of all the things that we need to do in total to change the way we get around. So we need partly to be reducing the amount that people need to travel. We can do that through broadband and other IT systems. We can support public transport, buses and trains, for example, to help people get around in different ways. We can make it easier for people to walk and cycle, those large number of small journeys that people make within towns and cities. So electric vehicles aren't the entire solution, they're part of the solution, but they are an important part. Here in the UK, every year, due to poor air quality, air pollution, up to 50,000 people die prematurely. That's a really, really important prize to seize by going ahead with electric vehicles.
What do you say to those who say the environmental credentials of electric cars need to be reassessed?
I think it's absolutely right that for any product, and that includes electric vehicles, includes conventional vehicles, we absolutely need to look in the round. I'm not saying for a second that electric vehicles are perfect right now. They're far from it. They're at the beginning of a stage of development, and they've got a long way to go. But they do offer some fantastic opportunities if we get that renewable electricity generated, and that's what Friends of the Earth are campaigning for here in the UK, to get our carbon emissions down, to tackle air pollution and those deaths from air pollution. So they are definitely a part of the future.
And there is quite a debate going on about whether or not they will be used much more in the years ahead. We've been getting plenty of reaction online here at Al Jazeera. We in fact asked, will electric cars lead the way on our roads and leave petrol motors in the ditch? Maurice Kent Thompson says the combustion engine has long been past its day. The auto industry has mushroomed the electric car for the past 50 years. It's time to send the gas-guzzling, sludge-burning oil Texas tea that is back to extinction from whence it came. Elizabeth Owen says that it's good, but what to do about toxic battery disposal? Jonathan Malachi Olivares hopes the entire world gives up any form of oil fuel. We're killing our earth, our planet, the place we live in, and our children will live in. And Jessica Lange says we need to give energy diversity a chance. She says, to all the naysayers, when we came down off of horses, there were people that were afraid. Look at what happened. Let innovation and imagination have a chance. Fear gets us nowhere. Nick Gibbs, what do you think? What would it take for this wall of fear to crumble? Or are there too many naysayers still around?
Well, I think the cost has to come down. And for the cost to come down, more have to be bought. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But the car companies are being more innovative about it. For example, Renault have brought out the Twizy, which is sort of like a four-wheel electric scooter. and which is a really smart way for getting around town. Honda have just shown something similar that they're going to produce. So they are looking at ways to get around this. The problem is that they work better in the city, and in the city you want small cars, but the trouble is you can't build the cost of an electric power pack into a small car. Opel have just canned their development of a small version of their new Adam City car. It's a massive problem. Tesla are able to sell the S because it's a big car. They can build in the cost of the electric motor and batteries into that without the consumer worrying too much. And that's the issue. And then we've got the problem of where to park them, where to charge them, because they work so well in the city. But the trouble is, if you live in the city, you haven't got a garage. You probably park on the streets. And how do you get the cable from your house to the car? You know, there are massive problems that the industry and governments have to overcome before this market will take off.
So a lot of challenges, but once they are addressed, do you think that drivers will inevitably be driven towards these types of alternative powered vehicles? Just how long do you think this will take?
Well, I think they will, because actually driving them, they're quite good fun. You know, there's nothing seriously different. You know, from getting out of an ordinary diesel into one of these. It does much of the same things. It's automatic. It's easy to drive. You know, there's no problems on that front. The range has to get bigger, and also the charging has to be sold. We have to have more fast chargers. But it's not going to take a while. A consultancy group, IHS, estimated that only 1.6% of cars built in Europe by 2020 are going to be electric. I mean, that's nothing. But only 4.6% are going to be hybrid. The majority of cars into the future are going to be diesel and petrol. And that's where it's going to stay until something radical happens.
Paul Steedman, how about the energy efficiency argument? How much will that help in getting these electric cars a bigger share of the market?
Well, I think if we really put our foot down, various modelling shows that we could be up as high as 75% of our vehicle fleet in the UK by 2030 if we get the right incentives in place. And if we do that, and if we also cut the amount of travel we have to do, and crucially, if we also make sure that petrol and diesel engines are much more efficient than they are today, then our emissions, our carbon emissions, are going to fall from transport by around 75%. That's a prize that we've got to seize and we've got to do urgently. But I completely agree that it needs the infrastructure in place, it needs the charging in place, it needs those costs to come down to a level where consumers can see that this is the sensible option to take.
Are these the right incentives then that you mentioned, and is it down to the government to do more?
I think there's definitely a role for government to ensure that this early stage, that prices are at a level that is competitive, that people feel that they can make that choice, and that also it's definitely down to government to ensure that the infrastructure is in place. Government also probably has a role in ensuring that people beyond just drivers benefit from this revolution. In the UK, we have almost 1 million green jobs, of which electric car manufacturing and components are a part. And if people feel that they have those benefits, they see those jobs, then people will embrace the electric car revolution. And government has a key role in securing those manufacturing jobs for the future.
Nick Gibbs, for this revolution to take shape, how much more development and research needs to take place, and how serious are the challenges in these difficult economic times?
They're very serious. On one hand, you've got the government who are being forced to cut back on public spending. So things like putting in more charge points that might not get used for a while isn't top of their priorities. And then secondly, you've got the car companies which themselves are feeling pressures, economic pressures. And so they're cutting their electric programs. And we've seen that the companies, the smaller companies that have persisted in this are running into their own difficulties. Tesla themselves have lost almost $1 billion since they first started up. Fisker, which is another plug-in hybrid making company in the US, they've run into financial problems, and the company that supplies batteries to GM, a company called A123 Systems, has gone bankrupt and had to be bought out. You know, it was almost like a bit like the internet .com boom, where everybody was embracing this this new technology that was going to revolutionize the planet, but just got in a bit too early. Car companies that do stay in and do go the course will lose money in the short term, but I think eventually it will pay off, but it will take a long time and there will be a hard road ahead.
How much are these conventional big manufacturing companies today investing in and focusing on developing electric cars? Because first generation cars, even though they didn't do very well, and we mentioned at the beginning the Nissan Leaf and there's also the Chevy Volt, despite those shortcomings, we noticed that pretty much on a regular basis, some of these big companies like BMW, Mitsubishi, Ford, and others keep churning out some of these electric cars.
Yeah, that's true, and almost everybody has got an electric program of some sort. Now, the money they spend on that electric program differs vastly, and some of them you'll never get a true figure out of it. You know, some of them like to, you know, they keep their finger on the pulse, but you have no idea exactly how much they're throwing into it. The companies we do know who are supporting it, like Nissan and Renault, are putting a lot of money behind it, and that's paying off in terms of the products that they're coming out with. The others are torn between putting a lot of bad money into something that's not going to pay off and missing out on what's going to be the next big thing. They don't want to become like they did with hybrids and Toyota, where Toyota got this massive head start and are now reaping the benefits. So it's difficult. It depends on who you speak to, but nobody's completely writing it off.
Paul Steedman, from an environmental perspective, which countries, which regions have more incentive in developing this type of technology?
I guess I can speak particularly from the UK point of view, which is to say that here we're seeing manufacturing of electric vehicles starting on the ground right now, and that's partly because the government's been quite strong in encouraging those companies to come here. And we're seeing those companies starting to invest in that infrastructure as well. So Nissan and the energy company Ecotricity have just embarked on rolling out across the UK motorway network a range of fast charging points, which mean that the infrastructure is not just going in towns and cities, but it's starting to go in across the road network. It's a long way to go for the UK to be in the place it needs to be, but we're starting to see that happen.
But again, how much of an argument is there for those who say that the environmental harm made by producing this type of technology actually outweighs its advantages?
Well, if we look at things in the round, I guess you know, there's nothing greener than walking or cycling, and so that's, I guess, where we have to start when it comes to transport. Rather than arguing the ins and outs of a technology that is in its infancy, is just getting going, I'm, I guess, quite optimistic that human ingenuity will ensure that we get past some of those key challenges. But if we want to focus right now on the lowest environmental impact forms of getting about, they are not having to get about at all, because we don't need to if we use video conferencing, if we use IT really cleverly. Walking, cycling, using trains and buses, and crucially ensuring that we have really, really good fuel standards, fuel economy standards for petrol and diesel cars right now, even as we're developing and overcoming some of those challenges around battery technology for electric vehicles.
Nick Gibbs, just a final thought on what you think this award given to the Tesla Model S will do for increasing, again, the desirability, the market share for these types of electric vehicles?
It can only be a good thing. And crucially, what Tesla had done, they didn't go overboard in making it look different. they've said, look, they designed a car that's conventional yet good looking, and that's exactly the right thing to do. It ensures that people aren't put off by any nerdy or quirky looks, and they've got the drive right. They've made sure that it's quick and it's powerful and the range is right, and all these things are going to convert a few people, but those could be the important people that the car companies need to become a sort of trendsetter for the technology. I think it's an important turning point, yes.
All right, we'll leave our discussion there. Nick Gibbs and Paul Steedman, thank you both very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this program. And thank you, as always, for joining us on Inside Story. You can, of course, send us your feedback by emailing us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Rida Fakhri, here in Doha, and the entire team, thanks for watching.